Part 1. Life turned upside down by a ridiculous clause. Vincent Vince Delgado lounged in a sleek black leather chair in the penthouse office atop Delgado Paradise, his flagship hotel and casino. His long legs were propped up on the polished ebony desk, and in one hand, he lazily twirled a chilled martini glass. The tropical sun of San Solara streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow over his tousled hair, bronze like burnished copper under the sunset's light. At 32, Vince was a self-made millionaire, the mastermind behind a string of luxury hotels and the most renowned casinos along the coast. He prided himself on his heart-stopping smile, dubbed his secret weapon that made women swoon by the local press, and an indulgent, unattached lifestyle. Below, the beachside city stretched out like a flawless painting, glistening golden sand, waves whispering against the shore, and his towering hotels standing like beacons of wealth and extravagance. This was his empire built from the ground up. He had grown up learning the trade in his father's casinos, counting cards, reading opponents, turning spare change into a fortune. Vince didn't believe in love. He didn't believe in family. The only thing he trusted was his bank account and the power it gave him. Being single is the ultimate freedom, he had once declared in an interview, flashing the signature smirk that made thousands of readers weak in the knees. But today, that very freedom was under threat by something he never saw coming, an old, dusty will from his father, who had passed away 2 years ago. Roberto, his lawyer, stepped inside, his rumpled gray suit clinging to his small frame, round glasses slipping down his nose. He placed a thick file on the desk and pushed it toward Vince, his face far too serious for such a beautiful day. "Vincent," he began, his voice as steady as a judge delivering a sentence, "your father included a clause in his will. You must get married within the next 2 months, before May 15th, to retain ownership of Delgado Paradise. If you don't, the entire empire will go to Marco." Vince burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the spacious office, his martini nearly sloshing over the rim. "I'm sorry, what? Marriage? Was the old man losing his mind?" He leaned forward, scanning the document, recognizing the familiar scrawl of his father's handwriting, punctuated by a bright red notary seal. But as his laughter faded, Roberto remained expressionless. "This isn't a joke," the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses. "Your father believed that a man without a family wasn't fit to lead. If you don't marry Marco, your cousin inherits everything." Vince's amusement died instantly. Marco, his degenerate, gambling-addicted cousin, the man who had a particular talent for losing fortunes in Vince's own casinos. Marco had once burned through tens of thousands in a single night, only to stumble into Vince's office the next morning with a sheepish grin and a wrinkled shirt, asking for a little loan. The thought of Marco taking over, running Delgado Paradise into the ground with his reckless stupidity, sent a shudder up Vince's spine. "My father wanted me to settle down," Vince muttered, rubbing his temple. "I am settled in making money and avoiding marriage traps." Roberto shrugged, his voice maddeningly calm. "It's written in plain terms. 2 months or you lose everything. I've reviewed it. There are no legal loopholes." Vince leaned back, staring at the ceiling, picturing his father, an old-school casino mogul with a silver beard and razor-sharp eyes, watching from the afterlife, probably laughing his ass off at this final twist of the knife. "Fine," he said at last, his signature smirk creeping back onto his face, full of defiance. "If the old man wants me married, I'll get married, but not for real." His fingers drummed lightly on his glass as a plan formed in his mind. Fast, simple, and unbeatable, like every hand he'd ever played. "I'll find someone willing to play along, sign a 6-month contract, fake the marriage, and then we part ways. Easy." Vince took a slow sip of his martini, confident that, like every game he played, he was going to win this one too. At the same time, just a few blocks away from Vince's lavish office, Lila Lee Moreno was living in a world of her own. Under the pale moonlight, she stood on the beach near the main entrance of Delgado Paradise, gripping a can of bright orange spray paint, her eyes ablaze with determination. In front of her loomed a massive bronze dolphin statue, an art piece Vince proudly commissioned to honor the beauty of nature. But to Lila, it was nothing more than a symbol of greed and hypocrisy. At 28, Lila was a street artist and part-time scuba diving instructor, her wild hair framing a face that belonged to the ocean more than to the land. She wore her favorite faded t-shirt, a grinning shark graphic stretched across the front, her personal badge of defiance. She had grown up on the shores of San Solara, where her parents once ran a small beachside eatery before going bankrupt due to the expansion of luxury resorts like Vince's. Since childhood, Lila had loved sea turtles, resilient creatures that braved the ocean's dangers, and had dedicated her life to protecting them through the Marine Rescue Center she now considered her second home. But now that center was on the verge of shutting down due to a lack of funds, and she felt as if her very dreams were slipping away. She sprayed bold letters across the dolphin's gleaming metal body. "Luxury kills the ocean." "Done," she murmured, stepping back to admire her work, satisfaction flooding her veins. But just as she was about to leave, a sharp crack echoed through the night. The statue wobbled under the weight of the paint, teetered dangerously, then collapsed into the sand with a deafening boom. Lila froze, mouth agape, spray can still in hand. Oh shit! Alarms blared from the nearby hotel. Before she could bolt, a team of security guards stormed toward her, and standing in the middle of them, like a damn movie villain, was Vince Delgado himself. His white suit fluttered in the night breeze, and that infamous heart-melting smirk, now edged with something far more dangerous. Well, he drawled, his voice smooth as silk but cold as ice. "You just destroyed a $50,000 statue. Care to explain, or should I call the cops now?" Lila swallowed hard, but she wasn't the type to back down. "That ugly thing deserved it," she shot back, lifting her chin defiantly. "You think throwing money at scrap metal makes you an environmentalist, rich boy?" Vince arched a brow, surprised by her audacity. He stepped closer, his steel-gray eyes locking onto hers, and instead of anger, an idea flickered to life in his mind. This girl, with her fiery glare, her reckless courage, and that ridiculous shark t-shirt, might just be the perfect solution to his problem. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone suddenly lighter. "Lila Moreno," she bit out. "Remember it, because you just got yourself into big trouble." The next morning, Lila found herself summoned to Vince's office. She entered with her arms crossed, still wearing the same shark t-shirt, ready to fight whatever ridiculous fine he was about to throw at her. Vince sat behind his desk, clad in a tailored gray suit that fit his athletic frame like a second skin, watching her like a predator eyeing its prey. "I have a proposition," he said smoothly, exuding confidence. "You marry me for 6 months. I'll pay you $1 million, enough to cover the damages and save your precious turtles." Lila blinked, then burst out laughing, loud and unrestrained. "You're insane. I'd rather swim with actual sharks than marry you." She turned on her heel to leave, but Vince's voice stopped her. "Hold on." She sighed, exasperated, but turned back anyway. "I know your Marine Rescue Center is about to shut down," he continued, his voice casual, but his gaze sharp. $1 million can save it, and more than that." He leaned back, letting his words sink in. 6 months, no touching, no romance, just a business contract. You play the happy wife, I keep my company. Once it's over, we go our separate ways. Lila clenched her fists around the straps of her backpack. Images of the injured turtles in their rescue tanks flashed through her mind. The worried faces of her colleagues when she had promised to find a way. $1 million wasn't just a lifeline. It was a second chance to rebuild what had been lost since her parents' restaurant shut down. But marrying Vince Delgado, the walking embodiment of everything she despised, wealth, arrogance, unchecked indulgence. "You think I'd sell myself for money?" she snapped, glaring at him. "No," Vince replied, his smirk sharpening. "I think you're smart enough to recognize an opportunity when you see one. And don't worry, sweetheart, I'm not interested in you either. This is just a deal." Lila stood there, fists clenched, battling the storm inside her. She imagined the rescue center thriving again, the turtles swimming free, and herself, not lying awake at night wondering how to pay next month's rent. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "Fine, but I have rules. Stay 1 meter away from me at all times, Never call me babe, and if you so much as look at me the wrong way, I'll throw you into the ocean myself." Vince chuckled, a genuine deep laugh that softened the tension in the room. "You," he mused, shaking his head, "are a steal, Lila Moreno. The contract will be ready this afternoon. Welcome to my game." Lila scowled, but a flicker of amusement danced in her eyes. She spun on her heel and strode out, vowing to turn these 6 months into his personal nightmare. Meanwhile, Vince watched her go, his smirk fading slightly. He wasn't sure if he had just found his salvation or walked into the one gamble he couldn't control. But one thing was certain, his life had just officially been turned upside down, and Lila Moreno was not going to make this easy. Welcome to Soul Stories. Life can be overwhelming, but here we share heartfelt tales to bring you peace, joy, and inspiration. Your support, every comment, like, and follow means the world to us. It motivates us to create more meaningful and uplifting stories just for you. Did our latest story touch your heart? Leave a "I am happy" in the comments if you agree. Subscribe now and be part of a community that spreads love, kindness, and positivity. Let's make every day a little brighter, together. Part 2. The pranks begin. Vince Delgado's seaside villa, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the San Solara Ocean, was an architectural masterpiece that left anyone in awe. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealing endless blue waters, polished ebony floors gleaming like a mirror, and an infinity pool shimmering under the tropical sun like a giant gemstone. Lila Moreno stepped into the house, her expression a mix of amazement and disdain, carrying an old backpack stuffed with shark print t-shirts, spray paint cans, and a pair of worn-out flip-flops. "This isn't a house," she muttered sarcastically, eyeing the abstract paintings on the walls. "It's a movie set for you to show off." Vince leaned against the balcony railing, his white suit fluttering in the sea breeze, his signature heart-melting smile curving with confidence. "Welcome to our home, Lila Moreno," he said, his voice smooth as if advertising a luxury getaway. "Consider yourself the grand prize winner. You get to live with me for 6 months. "Keep dreaming," Lila shot back, tossing her backpack onto the expensive leather sofa without a second thought. "If this is a home, then I'm the bird trapped in your arrogant golden cage." She crossed her arms, her sharp eyes glaring at him like they could shoot sparks. Vince chuckled, a warm but challenging laugh. "A bird, more like a shark with wings. Relax, will you? Your room's upstairs, right next to mine. And don't worry, I'll respect your 1-meter no-go zone rule, unless you break it first." He winked, making Lila grit her teeth in frustration. She stomped up the stairs, her footsteps heavy as if heading into battle. But in their minds, an unspoken war had already begun. Drive the other crazy until they quit first. Neither said it out loud, but their 6-month contract had suddenly turned into a dangerous, yet hilarious, game of endurance. One they were both determined to win, even as their hearts started beating to a rhythm they refused to acknowledge. That first night in her new home, Lila had barely settled into the most luxurious, king-size bed she had ever slept in when an obnoxiously sentimental melody blared from somewhere nearby. "Love is like a bird soaring through the storms." A crooning voice filled the air, carrying through the thin walls from Vince's room next door, like a torturous love ballad played at full volume. Lila shot up, slamming her hand against the wall hard enough to send dust falling. "Hey, turn off that god-awful noise!" The music stopped. Then came Vince's voice, syrupy sweet but teasing. "Why so angry, Lila? This is sophisticated music. Surely you can appreciate it. I thought you'd sing along." "Sophisticated my ass," she yelled, throwing her blanket aside, her eyes blazing. "I need to sleep for my dive tomorrow, not listen to you butchering karaoke like a wailing ghost." But seconds later, the music resumed, this time louder, accompanied by Vince deliberately singing off-key, "I will love you till the end of team." Lila clenched her teeth, gripping her pillow as she fantasized about storming into his room and strangling him. That night, she barely slept, her eyes darkening with exhaustion. Meanwhile, Vince strutted into the dining room the next morning, fresh as ever, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "Sleep well, my dear wife?" he asked, his innocent act so infuriating that Lila wanted to throw the whole table at him. She didn't answer, just glared at him, gripping her glass of orange juice so tightly it almost shattered. But Vince wasn't done. A few days later, he upped the game with a new stunt. While Lila was leading a group of tourists on a scuba diving tour near the coral reef, a delivery truck rolled up onto the beach, overflowing with red roses. Not just a bouquet, but dozens, as if an entire flower field had been uprooted for this joke. The delivery guy, red-faced from the sun, shouted across the crowd, "Delivery for Lila Moreno, from your husband, Vincent Delgado, with a note, 'Thank you, my love, for brightening my life.'" The tourists gasped. Some clapped. Lila, still in the water, nearly dropped her snorkel. She surfaced, her wet hair plastered to her face, and glared at the mountain of flowers like she wanted to set them on fire with her eyes. "My husband?" she growled at the delivery guy, her voice shaking from humiliation and rage. "Tell my husband he's going to regret this." Rumors spread like ocean waves. Her co-workers at the diving center wouldn't stop teasing her. "Didn't know you secretly married a billionaire, Lee." Lila could only force a weak smile, silently adding another debt to her tab with Vince, vowing to pay him back, twice over. Vince unleashed his third prank over the weekend. While Lila sat in the kitchen making her rare morning coffee, her only way to stay sane after sleepless nights, Vince accidentally bumped into her, spilling the entire cup of hot coffee onto her beloved shark print t-shirt. "Oh no," he gasped, feigning panic. "I'm so clumsy, my dear wife. Let me clean that up for you." He reached for a napkin, but Lila yanked it away, her face turning red. "Don't touch me," she snapped, but the mischievous grin on his face told her this wasn't an accident. "So that's how you want to play? Fine, just wait." Lila wasn't one to back down. That afternoon, while Vince was in a meeting with investors, she secretly rented a small tanker truck, the kind used for waste disposal, and dumped gallons of salty ocean water into his pristine infinity pool. The mix of seawater, natural algae, and a few tiny fish that drifted in from the shore transformed his luxurious pool into a green, murky, foul-smelling eco-pond. That night, Vince came home, shrugged off his suit jacket, and dove straight into the pool to unwind, only to shoot back up instantly, his face twisting in horror at the stench. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, his hair covered in seaweed, water dripping from his swim trunks onto the deck. Lila lounged nearby, pretending to read a book, her lips curling in triumph. "Oh, you don't like swimming with nature? I thought you loved the ocean. Consider it a little gift from your beloved wife." Vince climbed out of the pool staring at her, but instead of getting angry, he let out a deep, amused laugh. "You're good, Lila Moreno. This isn't over." He walked inside, leaving a wet trail on the floor. Strangely enough, the prank made him find her even more interesting. The spicy revenge. Lila's next move was a culinary masterpiece. Over the weekend, she sweetly offered to cook a romantic dinner to rekindle their marital bond. The overly saccharine tone made Vince suspicious, but curiosity got the better of him, so he agreed. Wearing an apron, Lila prepared a vibrant feast. Tacos, seafood fried rice, and a plate of special sauce, so fiery red it could rival the sunset. "Try it, darling," Lila cooed, her eyes shimmering with fake innocence as she slid a plate of tacos toward Vince. He smirked, picked one up, and took a big bite, only for his eyes to widen in shock as his mouth caught fire. The sauce was infused with the hottest chili peppers in all of San Solara, blended to an unholy potency. Vince coughed violently, his face turning as red as a boiled lobster, but he forced a grin, refusing to let her win. Delicious," he choked out between desperate gulps of water, his hand trembling as he reached for a glass of milk. Lila rested her chin on her palm, smiling sweetly. "Glad you like it. I made it just for you." "Oh, I love it," Vince rasped, swallowing thickly. But as he met her smug gaze, he had to admit, she was infuriatingly good at making him both mad and captivated. The shark surprise. The next day, Lila added a smaller prank to her arsenal. She secretly left a gift at Vince's door, a plastic toy shark, complete with a note, "Dear husband, here's your new swimming buddy for the pool." When Vince opened his door and nearly stepped on it, He burst into laughter, shaking his head. He glanced down the hallway, where Lila was innocently dusting a shelf, her eyes glinting with victory. The gala showdown. The prank war came to a temporary halt when they had to attend a formal dinner with investors from Delgado Paradise. To maintain appearances, Vince and Lila had no choice but to play the role of a blissfully happy couple. Lila wore a simple yet elegant ocean blue dress that hugged her slender figure, making her eyes shine even brighter. Vince, dressed in a sleek black tuxedo, looked like he had stepped right out of a magazine cover. They sat side by side, hands intertwined under the table for show, but the tension between them was razor sharp. Vince leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. "You look stunning, darling. I almost believe this is real." "Shame you're not," Lila quipped, flashing a sweet smile as she casually nudged his foot under the table, making him wince. The highlight of the evening came when Mr. Ramirez, an older investor with a silver beard, playfully requested they show a little marital affection. "Kiss her hand, Vincent," he chuckled, raising his wine glass. Vince, ever the charmer, took Lila's hand and lifted it elegantly, preparing to press a gentlemanly kiss to her fingers, both as a romantic gesture and a way to tease her. But Lila was faster. Just as he leaned in, she yanked her hand away, accidentally throwing him off balance. Vince lost his footing and toppled forward, face first into a lavish seafood platter of lobster and buttery garlic sauce. The entire room fell silent. Then hushed giggles rippled through the crowd before erupting into full-blown laughter. Vince sat up, his face smeared with sauce, his hair a mess, but he still managed a tight-lipped smile. "My wife is just playing around," he said, shooting Lila a warning look. "Oh, honey, you're so clumsy," Lila cooed, patting his shoulder in mock sympathy. But the victorious glint in her eyes was unmistakable. The investors laughed heartily, calling them adorable. But as the evening wore on and the lights dimmed, Vince and Lila turned to glare at each other, neither willing to back down. And yet, in that fleeting moment when their hands accidentally brushed while wiping sauce from his jacket, they both felt it, that strange, electric jolt. A feeling they both hurried to dismiss, but couldn't quite erase. Part 3. Feelings put to the test. Time flowed as swiftly as the waves washing away the golden sands of San Solara Beach. The fateful date in Vince's father's will, May 15th, was now less than a week away. Vince's seaside villa, once the battleground for his and Lila's relentless pranks, had transformed into a chaotic command center for their impending, reluctant wedding. Lavish invitation cards lay scattered across the ebony wood table. Sample flower arrangements cluttered the living room, and the air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt coffee. The result of Vince's failed attempts to stay awake through the whirlwind of planning. Standing on the balcony, he held a now lukewarm martini in one hand, his gray eyes fixed on the shimmering ocean under the fading sunlight. He knew he couldn't stall any longer. The wedding had to happen if he wanted to keep Delgado Paradise out of the hands of his cousin Marco, a man whose mere existence made Vince want to punch a wall. But deep down, he could no longer tell himself that this was just a game to win. Every time he looked at Lila, with her fiery eyes and the way she challenged him so fearlessly, his heartbeat quickened, an unfamiliar feeling he fought hard to ignore. Lila emerged from the kitchen, her arms full of wedding magazines she had borrowed from the Rescue Center for research. Not that she would ever admit it. Her favorite shark print t-shirt, now speckled with paint from this morning's art session, clung to her effortlessly, her eyes gleaming like sunlit waves. "We need to pick out rings, practice dancing, and decide whether I should wear a wetsuit instead of a wedding dress," she said, half joking, but with an almost imperceptible flicker of hesitation in her gaze as it brushed over Vince. He turned to her, smirking to mask the slight nervousness creeping up his spine. "A wetsuit? I'll have you walk down the aisle with an oxygen tank just so everyone thinks I'm marrying a mermaid. But first, let's survive this week." They both chuckled, but their eyes lingered on each other a moment too long, just enough to make the air between them hum with something unspoken. The prank war continued, but now every joke carried a different weight, as if they weren't just testing each other's patience anymore, but testing their own hearts. True to his love for the dramatic, Vince decided to kick things up a notch with a psychological tactic. He hired a street band, Three musicians with a guitar, a violin, and voices so sweet they could melt stone, to follow Lila around like her personal soundtrack. Wherever she went, whether it was the beach, the Sea Turtle Rescue Center, or right outside the villa, the trio would break into an emotional rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love. Their harmonized chorus of I Can't Help Falling in Love with You, so sappy it could give anyone goosebumps. The first attack happened on a scorching afternoon while Lila was leading a group of tourists on a diving tour. Just as she surfaced from the water, her wet hair sticking to her shoulders, the band emerged from behind a rock, playing away. Wise men say only fools rush in. Lila froze, her face turning scarlet. Whether from anger or humiliation, she wasn't sure. While the tourists clapped enthusiastically, some even shouting, "Congratulations to the bride." Furious, she stormed back to the villa, dripping seawater onto the polished wooden floors as she barged into the living room. Vince sat there, completely unfazed, sipping a martini and flipping through the newspaper like nothing had happened. "Are you insane?" she yelled. "You hired a whole band just to make me a walking joke?" Vince looked up, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "I just wanted my bride to have a fitting soundtrack. Isn't it romantic? I thought you'd be so moved you'd run straight into my arms." "Romantic, my ass," she snapped, fist clenched. But as the band continued to pop up, while she checked on turtles at the rescue center, while she bought coffee, even when she stood on the balcony, Lila found herself hesitating whenever she heard the song. She told herself it was just frustration, but deep down she couldn't shake the way those lyrics, falling in love and not being able to resist, started to settle in her head. The pirate payback. Lila refused to lose. For her revenge, she volunteered to pick out Vince's wedding attire. One morning, she dragged him to the most famous tailor shop in San Solara, where she had secretly arranged for a special outfit. When Vince stepped out of the dressing room, he was decked out in full pirate gear, ripped white shirt, flared pants, a tricorn hat, and even a plastic parrot perched on his shoulder. "Well?" he asked, spinning once, his voice tinged with suspicion, but still laced with his signature confidence. He even struck a pose, hands on his hips like a true pirate lord. "Perfect!" Lila burst out laughing, eyes gleaming as she snapped a flurry of photos. Before Vince could react, she had already posted them online with the caption, "My future husband, ready to steal treasure and hearts." The picture spread like wildfire. Vince's hotel staff bombarded him with teasing messages. Investors called, some half-jokingly asking if he actually planned to wear that to the wedding. Even Marco, his cousin, texted, "Looking good, but I still want the company." Vince stared at his ridiculous reflection in the mirror, but instead of getting mad, he let out a resigned chuckle. "You're evil, Lila Moreno," he muttered. Yet as he caught her reflection in the mirror, her laughter bright, her expression genuinely amused, he wondered if he was starting to like this little devil. One last trick. That night, Lila had one more prank up her sleeve. As they tested the wedding sound system in the living room, she secretly adjusted Vince's microphone so that every time he spoke, it let out an ear-piercing screech. "Testing, 1, 2, Vince started. "Ray!" The deafening feedback made him jolt, nearly dropping the mic. Lila, lounging on the sofa, feigned surprise. "Oh no, must be a technical issue, darling." Vince shot her a glare, but his lips twitched in amusement. He knew exactly who the culprit was. Choosing rings and practicing their wedding dance were unavoidable parts of the wedding preparations. One afternoon, they arrived at the studio of Mrs. Rosa, a dance instructor with fiery red curls and a personality as vibrant as the ocean waves. Her cozy studio smelled of lavender from decorative vases scattered around, and the warm golden light reflected off the polished wooden floor. "You two must dance beautifully," Mrs. Rosa declared, clapping her hands excitedly. "A wedding is incomplete without a romantic waltz." Lila crossed her arms, looking as if she was ready to bolt. "I'd rather swim with sharks than dance with him." "Just give it a try. I'll lead you through the music," Vince said, extending his hand with his signature smirk, though there was an unexpected softness in his eyes. They started practicing. Vince's hand rested lightly on Lila's waist, the warmth of his touch making her hesitate for just a second before she regained her usual stubborn stance. His other hand clasped hers, and as Mrs. Rosa played the soothing melody of Moon River, the slow rhythm pulled them into another world. At first, the air was thick with tension. Lila deliberately stepped on Vince's foot, making him wince with an ow. In return, he spun her so fast she nearly tripped, their forced smiles masking an unspoken battle through dance. But then, the music slowed, and without thinking, Vince pulled her closer. Not as a tease, but because, for a moment, he got lost in it. Their faces were mere inches apart. His breath brushed against her cheek, the faint scent of his woody cologne sending her heart racing. Vince's gray eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, she didn't just see challenge in them. There was something warm, something unfamiliar that made her uneasy. Time seemed to freeze. Their lips were so close, she could feel the heat radiating from him. But then, Lila abruptly pulled away, taking a shaky step back, her face as red as a boiled shrimp. I got dizzy, she stammered, turning away to hide the warmth spreading across her cheeks. Yeah, must have been the slow tempo, Vince muttered, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to shake off his own awkwardness. But his heart was pounding, and as he looked at Lila, her messy hair, her unwilling gaze, he knew he had almost crossed a line they had both been trying to ignore. Mrs. Rosa clapped her hands, grinning. Amazing! There's real fire between you two. Keep it just like that for the wedding. Lila and Vince exchanged a glance, silent, yet both fully aware of the lingering tension between them, like waves that refused to stop crashing against the shore. They left the studio in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Lila told herself, it was just a dance, nothing more. But Vince, gripping the steering wheel, couldn't help but wonder, what if I had kissed her? Everything came to a head when Lila overheard a conversation between Vince and his lawyer, Roberto, over the phone. While tidying up the living room, something she rarely did just to avoid him after the dance, she heard Vince's indifferent voice. I remember the Sea Turtle Rescue Center. They requested funding a few years ago, but I turned them down. No profit in it, just a waste of money. Lila froze, the broom slipping from her grasp and hitting the floor with a loud thud. That center meant everything to her. The place where she had once begged for every penny to save injured turtles from the very pollution caused by the tourism industry Vince profited from. She remembered that day vividly, standing outside his office, hands trembling as she held her proposal, only to be dismissed without even seeing him. And now, knowing that the man she was living with, the man she had almost kissed, was the same one who had crushed her dreams, she felt utterly betrayed. The confrontation. That night, she confronted him in the kitchen. Vince was slicing vegetables for dinner, a rare attempt at making peace after their tense days, when Lila stormed in, her eyes red with anger. You're heartless, she snapped, her voice trembling as she threw her apron onto the counter. You refuse to help the center just because it wouldn't put money in your pocket? I could never love a man like you. Vince set the knife down, turning to face her, his gray eyes darkening. The usual confidence in them was gone, replaced by something unreadable, something almost hurt. Good, he said coldly, because I never needed your love. This is a contract, Lila. If you want to keep playing the devoted wife, fine. If not, then get out right now. But his voice faltered at the end, and Lila saw his hand gripping the knife handle so tightly his knuckles turned white. She turned and stormed upstairs, slamming the door shut as tears spilled down her face. She told herself she hated him, but then why did it hurt so much? Silent truce. Vince remained in the kitchen, slamming his fist against the table, sending the chopped vegetables scattering. He told himself he didn't care. But the image of Lila's tear-filled eyes wouldn't leave his mind. For the first time, he questioned whether living for profit alone was truly worth it. For the next 2 days, they avoided each other like wounded animals, communicating only through short, impersonal notes. I'm at work. Don't wreck the house. Vince. Don't make noise. I need sleep. Lila. But on the third night, when Lila came downstairs for water, she found Vince sitting at the dining table. In front of him was a plate of tuna sandwiches, her favorite. Beside it, a note. Eat. Don't make me worry you're starving. Lila glanced from the plate to Vince, who was pretending to read the newspaper, but she caught him sneaking glances at her. Biting her lip, she sat down across from him and took a bite, saying nothing. The silence stretched between them, not tense, but something else. Not bad, she mumbled under her breath. Vince smirked. I know you like tuna. His voice was soft, almost gentle. They didn't apologize, they didn't mention the fight. But the way Lila left a glass of orange juice on the counter for him before heading upstairs, and the way Vince smiled when he saw it, that said everything. The wedding loomed closer, bringing both anticipation and unease. But now they both knew. Whatever was between them, it was no longer just a contract. It was something deeper, even if neither of them was ready to admit it yet. Wedding night, the truth no one expected. The beachside wedding at San Solara unfolded like a dream beneath the glowing full moon, so breathtaking that even Vince and Lila, despite their reluctance to admit it, couldn't help but be quietly amazed. The golden sands shimmered under hundreds of floating lanterns, casting a warm celestial glow as if the stars had descended to the earth. The waves murmured in harmony with the soft strains of a violin, while the lively cheers of the guests, ranging from Delgado Paradise's wealthy investors to Lila's bright-eyed friends from the Sea Turtle Rescue Center, filled the night air. Vince stood at the altar, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection, accentuating his tall, commanding frame. His tousled hair gleamed under the lights, and his signature smirk flickered between confidence and something more hesitant, as if he wasn't sure whether he was playing a game or stepping into reality. Across from him, Lila was stunning in an ethereal white gown, its delicate fabric billowing in the ocean breeze like waves. Her eyes sparkled like the stars reflected on the water, and her naturally tousled hair made her look more like a muse than the girl who once threatened to wear a wetsuit down the aisle. The vows were scripted, designed to make the contract official. But when Vince said, I, Vincent Delgado, take you, Lila Moreno, as my wife, his voice dipped lower, the word wife carrying more weight than he expected. Lila replied, I, Lila Moreno, take you, and she had to bite her lip to keep from smiling. But when her eyes met his, something warm flickered between them, something sweet, something neither of them dared to name. Applause erupted, the band struck up a lively tune, and then came the inevitable moment, the ceremonial kiss. Vince leaned in, his fingers tilting Lila's chin up ever so slightly, his thumb grazing her cheek in an unconscious caress. Lila rose onto her toes, her cheeks flushed pink under the moonlight. When their lips met, brief, polite, exactly as the script dictated, a strange current pulsed through them, warm and intoxicating like the lantern-lit night surrounding them. They pulled away quickly, Lila instinctively touching her lips as if to capture the sensation, while Vince cleared his throat and turned away, his eyes suspiciously bright. It was just for show, they both told themselves, but their racing hearts whispered otherwise. The wedding night, a war of wits. After the reception, the guests cheered and teased them toward their so-called wedding night. Even Roberto, Vince's usually reserved lawyer, smirked as he personally led them to a secluded wooden bungalow on the beach, a surprise gift from the investors to bless the happy couple. Lila shot Vince a glare, muttering under her breath, Don't even dream of anything sweet tonight. If you try anything stupid, I'll make this night a living nightmare. Vince smirked, his gray eyes glinting. Go ahead, wife. I'm curious to see just how sweet you can be. The bungalow was straight out of a fairy tale. Sloping thatched roof, glass windows opening to the sea, and an interior so romantic it stunned them both. A grand bed draped in pristine white sheets was adorned with red rose petals. Candles flickered with a soft, floral scent, and the waves outside whispered like a lullaby. Lila stepped inside, her bare feet pressing against the cool wooden floor. Trying to sound firm despite the sudden, erratic pounding in her chest, she said, Don't get any ideas. I'm taking the couch. You can have the bed. Hands in his pockets, Vince followed with an easy stride, his smile softer than usual, though mischief still danced in his eyes. No need to be so noble. Take the bed. I'll survive the couch. But, he paused, tilting his head playfully. Lila turned, ready to argue, then froze. Sitting smack in the middle of the bed, was a giant stuffed sea turtle, almost the size of a pillow. Beside it was a handwritten note in Vince's messy scrawl. "Welcome to the Delgado family, my dear wife. Vince." "You?" Lila burst into laughter, unable to hold it in. Her laughter rang through the small bungalow, bright and infectious. She grabbed the stuffed turtle and playfully tossed it at Vince. Not too hard, just enough to return the teasing. Vince caught it, grinning as he chuckled. A deep, warm sound that somehow made the candlelit room feel even cozier. "What? I know you love turtles. Consider it a heartfelt wedding gift." "What kind of heartfelt gift is this?" Lila huffed, turning away in mock indignation. But secretly, she found the gesture ridiculously adorable. Just like the way Vince was looking at her now, playful yet unexpectedly gentle. The final move. Determined to have the last laugh, Lila plotted her revenge. She climbed onto the bed and sprawled across the center, claiming the entire space like a queen staking her territory. Then she closed her eyes and pretended to be fast asleep. A few moments later, she let out the loudest, most exaggerated snoring sound imaginable. "Co, grr." She even threw in a dramatic growl for good measure, hoping to scare Vince off the bed completely. From across the room, Vince, lounging in an armchair by the window, with a glass of wine he had smuggled from the reception, raised an eyebrow, smirking. "You snore adorably, wife," he quipped. Still fake snoring, Lila heard him stand and approach. She nearly cracked an eye open, but before she could, Vince abruptly stopped. Then in an amused murmur, he said, "Fine, you win." He turned back to his chair. But what Lila didn't see was the warmth in his expression, the way her silly, childish prank made something inside him soften. The prank war continued deep into the night, both refusing to let down their guard. But as Lila lay there, her eyes half closed, she found herself thinking about that kiss, the way Vince had looked at her under the moonlight. And as Vince sat by the window, his empty wine glass in hand, he gazed out at the shimmering waves as if searching for answers in the tide. Neither of them spoke it out loud. But something had changed, and there was no going back. A thunderclap tore through the peaceful night, shattering the quiet. The wind howled, and within minutes a sudden storm rolled in. The bungalow trembled under the force of nature, the candle flames flickering before being snuffed out, plunging them into darkness. Only the relentless drumming of the rain and the low growl of thunder remained. "Damn it," Vince muttered, getting up to find a flashlight. But a gust of cold wind swept through the open window, making him shiver. Lila shot up from the bed, no longer pretending to sleep, and rushed to close the window. But the rain had already drenched her shirt, the fabric clinging to her skin. "What are you doing?" Vince called out, his voice laced with both concern and something gentler. "Sit down, I got it." He hurried over, yanking the window shut, but by then, they were both soaked. In the dark, they stumbled into each other and tumbled onto the floor. And in that moment, surrounded by the storm, breathless and tangled, the rain seemed to drown out everything between them. Lila inhaled sharply, her body closer to Vince's than ever before, and for the first time, she didn't push him away. "Was this part of your plan?" she asked, her voice unsteady from the cold but still teasing, her eyes searching for his silhouette in the dark. Vince let out a soft chuckle, the sound melting through the night like a melody. "Of course, I summoned the storm just so I could hold you for warmth." He shrugged off his tuxedo jacket, still warm from his body, and draped it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed against her bare skin, and she stilled. "Put it on," he murmured. "Don't make me worry about you catching a cold on our wedding night." Lila hesitated, but the cold won over her pride, and she pulled the jacket closer. The scent of his woody cologne wrapped around her like an invisible embrace, making her heartbeat stutter in an unfamiliar way. They sat there side by side, the storm raging outside, but something quieter, deeper settling between them. "You know," Vince broke the silence, his voice lower, softer, like a confession. "My father always told me life is about winning. Win in business, win in life. He forced me into this contract, and at first I thought marrying you was just another way to win." He exhaled, his fingers unconsciously tightening around the lapel of his jacket draped over her. "But now, I don't know if I'm winning or losing anymore. Lila turned to him. She couldn't fully see his face in the dark, but she felt the honesty in his words. What do you mean? She whispered, her heart tightening with something she couldn't name. I mean, Vince hesitated, his grip on her jacket tightening slightly. You drive me crazy, but you also make me laugh more than anyone ever has. I never wanted anything in life except money and power until you showed up, wearing that ridiculous shark t-shirt, arguing with me every chance you got. Lila bit her lip, her pulse racing. She took a slow breath before saying, I never told you this, but I've loved sea turtles since I was a kid. They became my family when I had no one else. Her voice softened. I hid it because I thought you'd mock me. But somehow, when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to hide anymore. Vince turned slightly, and in the dark, his hand brushed against hers on the floor. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers slowly curled around hers, lightly, tentatively, like an unspoken promise. I would never laugh at that, he murmured, because I love the way you love small things. It makes me want to love them too. The rain kept falling, but the air between them was warm. Lila shivered slightly from the cold, and without thinking, Vince pulled her closer, his arm wrapping around her in the most natural way. You really do snore like a little sea turtle, he teased, his voice laced with quiet affection. And I think I could listen to it forever without getting tired. Lila laughed, the sound bright and clear, like wind chimes in the rain. You, on the other hand, sing like a lovesick fool. But I don't hate it. She leaned her head against his shoulder, lightly like a petal settling onto water, and in that tiny movement, they both stilled. Vince tilted his head down, his hair brushing against hers, his breath warm against her forehead. Lila, he murmured, voice husky, if tonight wasn't about the contract, would you want it to be real? Lila looked up. Her eyes shone in the darkness, so close he could feel the rhythm of her breath. She hesitated. Then she smiled, small, soft, beautiful. Maybe I've wanted that for a while now. Ever since that night you drove me insane with that ridiculous love song. A crack of thunder rumbled and she startled slightly, instinctively clutching his arm. And they both laughed, awkward, sweet, like two people realizing they had found something they never expected. They didn't say I love you. But the way Vince held her hand, the way Lila leaned into him, said everything. As the storm calmed, the moon peeked through the clouds, its silver light casting a soft glow over their faces. Vince gazed at her, seeing something in her he wasn't ready to let go of. And for the first time he realized, this wedding, this night, this woman, was the realest thing he had ever had. Pulling her just a little closer, he whispered, You're my sea turtle, Lila Moreno. She smiled against his shoulder. And you, she whispered back, are my ocean, Vince Delgado. Part 5, Love Without a Contract. The morning after their stormy yet unexpectedly sweet wedding night, the golden Sansolera sunlight streamed through the bungalow windows, casting a warm glow over Vince and Lila. They woke up in a comfortable mess. Lila curled up on the bed, hugging the giant stuffed sea turtle like a childhood friend, her tousled hair sticking adorably to her cheek. While Vince had fallen asleep in the armchair, his tuxedo jacket loose, his fingers still clutching the coat he had draped over her the night before. They blinked at each other through the soft morning light, still groggy from sleep, and then, simultaneously, burst into laughter. It was an unguarded, genuine kind of laughter, as if the storm had washed away all the barriers between them, leaving behind something neither of them dared to name. But their happiness was short-lived, the price of freedom. Lawyer Roberto arrived soon after breakfast, his wrinkled gray suit hugging his small frame, a thick stack of documents in hand, and a triumphant smile on his lips. Congratulations, Vincent, he announced, placing the papers onto the small wooden table inside the bungalow. The wedding has officially legitimized the will. Delgado Paradise is now yours. Then, turning to Lila, he slid a check across the table, his expression professional, almost solemn. $1 million as agreed. You're free to leave anytime. Lila stared at the check. The number, 1 followed by 6 zeros, gleamed like a promise of freedom, of the dream she had fought for, saving the sea turtles. But her heart suddenly felt heavy. The check didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a wall separating her from something more important. She glanced at Vince, catching the way his grip tightened around his coffee cup, the flicker of unease in his gray eyes, an unspoken fear he couldn't mask, even as he tried to keep his expression neutral. The air turned thick, like they were standing at the edge of something neither of them wanted to confront. "I'll think about it," Lila said, her voice hesitant, an unfamiliar sound even to herself. Then she stood, taking the check, her footsteps slow as if she were deliberately delaying the moment. But once she stepped outside the bungalow, she stopped, staring out at the endless ocean. The contract was complete. She was free, just as she had always wanted. Then why did freedom suddenly feel like loss? She thought about the way Vince made her ginger tea when she was sick, the awkward embrace in the storm, the way he had whispered last night that she was his turtle. She was scared that if she walked away now, she'd never find that feeling again. But pride kept her from admitting it, because the truth was she had already fallen for him. A battle neither wanted to end. Inside the bungalow, Vince sat staring at his untouched coffee, a hollow sensation settling in his chest as Lila's silhouette disappeared beyond the door. The contract was fulfilled. He had won Delgado Paradise, the thing he had fought for his entire life. So why did victory taste so bitter? He thought of her ridiculous shark t-shirt, the way she argued with him over everything, the way she had shared just last night that her dream of saving sea turtles had been her only family growing up. This is just a contract, he told himself. If she wants to leave, let her. But deep down, he knew he didn't want to lose her. She had become more important than the empire he had spent his life building, and that terrified him. So even though the contract had ended, Vince did the only thing he knew how to do. He prolonged their prank war. It was an excuse, a way to keep her close. One afternoon, while Lila was painting a street art mural in the villa's living room, a beautiful image of a sea turtle swimming in the deep blue, Vince accidentally knocked over an entire can of blue paint onto her artwork. "Oh no!" he gasped dramatically, holding up the empty can. "I slipped. Must be because I've been thinking about you too much." Lila turned around, eyes blazing, glaring at the now ruined painting. "You did that on purpose," she accused. She grabbed a paintbrush, ready to throw it at him, then paused. A slow, mischievous smile curled her lips. "Fine. If you're going to ruin it, you're going to fix it. Sit down and pick up a brush." Vince grinned, dropping onto the floor beside her. Clumsy but determined, he smudged streaks of blue onto the ocean background, while Lila painted delicate little turtles. Their hands brushed as they worked, and neither of them pulled away. Paint got everywhere, on their hands, their clothes, even on Vince's face. Lila laughed as she wiped a smudge off his cheek. "You look more like a turtle than the ones in the painting," she teased, her voice unusually gentle. "Then I guess you're the best turtle caretaker I've ever met," Vince murmured, watching her with an expression he didn't bother to hide. Something shifted between them, a promise in the sand. Lila retaliated by dragging Vince to the beach under the pretense of checking on the turtles. "You don't know anything about the ocean," she taunted, her eyes twinkling. "Come with me and help check on the nests near the shore." Vince didn't argue. He followed her, pretending to struggle as he dug through the sand, making her laugh. "You're hopeless at this, husband," she teased. "I'm only bad at it, so you'll teach me, wife," he shot back smoothly. And so they lingered in each other's worlds, until one sunset, when the sky burned orange over San Solara, Vince made a decision. He had been working on something behind Lila's back, a secret investment in a brand new sea turtle sanctuary built right next to her rescue center, a place where injured turtles could heal, with a wide-open beach to release them back into the ocean. At the entrance, a plaque gleamed under the golden light. Lila's Sanctuary, a silent tribute to the dream she had once whispered to him on their wedding night. He didn't tell her right away. Instead, he simply said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." Lila eyed him suspiciously but followed, clutching the check in her pocket like a lifeline. When they arrived, she froze. The sanctuary stood before her, complete with modern tanks, a wooden boardwalk leading to the nesting beach, and the shining plaque with her name. Her colleagues stood nearby, smiling. A few baby turtles were already waiting to be released. "What? What is this?" Lila whispered, her voice trembling as she turned to Vince, her eyes wide. "I built it for you," Vince said simply, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You told me once that sea turtles were your family when you had no one else. I rejected your rescue center before because it wasn't profitable. But I want to make it right. This isn't a contract. This is because I want you to be happy, Lila." Lila stepped forward, running trembling fingers over the plaque. Tears welled in her eyes. She had fought so hard to protect her dream, had feared losing everything she loved. And now, standing in front of this, she realized she didn't have to lose him, too. "I've always been afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of loving something and losing it. I kept this check to protect myself, but now I don't want it anymore." Vince stepped closer, gently taking her hands. "Lila," he murmured, his voice rough, his eyes unguarded. "I love you. Stay with me, please." Lila looked up at him, tears falling, but her smile radiant. "I love you too, Vince, and I'm not going anywhere." She threw her arms around him, and as Vince kissed her, deep and unrestrained, he finally understood. Some things in life were worth more than winning. That evening, they returned to the villa and prepared a romantic dinner together in the warm kitchen. For the first time, not as a prank, but simply to cherish the love they had finally admitted. Lila stood at the stove, expertly grilling tuna with a touch of sea salt, her favorite dish, while Vince squeezed fresh lemon into honey, his gaze never leaving her. They set the table outside on the terrace, where the moon and the sound of the waves provided the perfect backdrop. Flickering vanilla-scented candles, a small vase of wildflowers Lila had picked, and two silver-rimmed glasses reflecting the moonlight. Vince, wearing the apron Lila had tied around him, clumsily chopped vegetables beside her. Their hands brushed when he passed her a plate, the warmth of his touch making her pause. "I can't promise it'll look pretty," he said, half joking, though his gaze was undeniably tender. "But I want to do this with you. Every day." Lila smiled, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "It's beautiful because you're here with me." As they sat down, the candlelight cast a golden glow over their faces. Vince reached for her hand across the table, lacing their fingers together, his voice low and steady. "I never thought I'd have a night like this, with the person I love most, the one who makes me want to be a better version of myself." Lila blushed, her eyes shimmering. She squeezed his hand. "I never thought I'd fall for a spoiled billionaire either," she teased, her voice soft. "But now, you're all I want. Every day, every night." They ate in a comfortable silence, with only the sound of the waves and the occasional laughter, when Vince clumsily dropped a piece of fish, making Lila shake her head. When dinner ended, Vince pulled her up into his arms, holding her from behind, his lips grazing her hair. "Stay with me tonight, Lila," he whispered. "Not because of anything else, just because I love you." Lila turned to face him, looking deep into his eyes now filled with nothing but love. "I love you too," she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. Then she pulled him in for a kiss, slow, deep, and filled with all the passion they had once resisted. They blew out the candles, stepped into the bedroom, and that night they held nothing back. There were no barriers, no pride, only love. As the moonlight streamed through the window, Vince held her close, whispering, "You are everything to me, Lila Moreno." She nestled against his chest and whispered back, "And you are my forever, Vince Delgado." They fell asleep in each other's arms, their breasts entwined, their love as boundless as the waves embracing the shore. A new beginning. The next morning, Lila stood before Vince, holding the $1 million check. Without hesitation, she tore it into pieces. The fragments fluttered to the floor. "I don't need it," she said. "I'm staying because I love you." Vince pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it was as if he feared she might disappear. "No divorce, then?" he murmured. "This contract is a real marriage now." Lila smirked. "If you drive me crazy, I'll still throw you into the ocean." Vince grinned, kissing her forehead. "Then I'll just have to pull you in with me." And just like that, they started a new life, one built on love, not contracts. Vince continued investing in Lila's sanctuary, expanding it into a place where she could fulfill her dream. Lila painted a mural in the Grand Hall of Delgado Paradise. Two people holding hands in the ocean, bathed in the golden glow of the sunset, surrounded by swimming sea turtles. They still bickered, still teased each other, but now every playful argument was a declaration of love. Every glance was a promise of forever. A year later. Vince and Lila's seaside villa was no longer quiet. Instead, it was filled with laughter and the occasional cries of their newborn twins, Mia and Tom. Mia, with her mother's bright eyes, loved crawling around the house, clutching a small stuffed turtle Vince had made just for her. Tom, who had inherited his father's signature heart-melting smile, constantly dropped his toys on the floor just to hear Lila's playful scolding. "These two are definitely your kids," Lila teased one morning, holding Mia in her arms while glaring at Vince as Tom threw a toy block at her foot. Vince smirked, bending down to pick up Tom, kissing the boy's chubby cheek. "Yeah, but they got your stubborn streak," he shot back. They still argued about spilled milk, about the stuffed turtles scattered all over the house. But now every argument was another way of saying, "I love you." Lila painted one more picture, hanging it next to Lila's sanctuary, a simple but heartfelt image of their family of four holding hands under the sunset, sea turtles swimming around them. "We're truly a family now," she whispered, leaning against Vince's shoulder. Vince wrapped an arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world." Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.